I gave my cheating wife everything in the divorce. She regrets it now. I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story on Reddit. But here I am, 3 months later, still processing what happened. And I need to get out. Maybe someone can learn from my mistakes. Or maybe I just need to confess. My name is David. I'm 46. I build cybersecurity software for a living. The ironic kind of work where you spend your days protecting other people's secrets while missing what's happening right under your nose. Let me tell you about Marcus first, because you need to understand him to understand everything else. Marcus and I go back to college. MIT, class of 2001. We were an odd pair even then. He was the guy who could walk into any room and own it within 5 minutes. Charisma just radiated off him like heat from asphalt in July. Me? I was a guy in a corner with a laptop, debugging code at 2 in the morning while everyone else was at parties I wasn't invited to. But Marcus always included me. He'd drag me out of computer lab, throw his arm around my shoulder, tell everyone I was a genius. And I ate it up, because when you're a socially awkward kid who thinks in algorithms instead of emotions, having a friend like Marcus feels like winning the lottery. We stayed close after graduation. He went into investment banking, made a fortune managing portfolios for tech executives who trusted him because he understood their world. Or at least, he understood it enough to sound convincing. I started Sentinel Code, my cybersecurity firm, built it from nothing. And when the money started rolling in, when I had more of my accounts than I knew what to do with, Marcus offered to handle it for me. He'd laugh and say I was brilliant with machines but hopeless with money. He'd joke that I could find a bug in 10,000 lines of code in 30 seconds, but wouldn't notice if my house was on fire. I laughed along, because he was right, wasn't he? I was the Rain Man of Silicon Valley. That's what he called me. David the Rain Man. Great with numbers. Terrible with people. Linda, my wife of 12 years, agreed. She'd roll her eyes when I forget our anniversary or miss some social cue that apparently everyone else on the planet understood instinctively. She married me for security, I think. The house in Palo Alto with the smart home system and the heated pool. The Tesla in the garage. The vacations to Tuscany and Bali. She got her yoga studio membership and her weekly spa appointments and her circle of friends who drove Range Rovers and complained about their contractors. I got someone who tolerated my quirks and showed up to company events looking perfect in designer dresses. It wasn't love. Not the kind you see in movies. But it worked, or I thought it did. On the day everything changed, I was working from home. Tuesday afternoon. Linda had left for her yoga class at noon. She went 3 times a week, same schedule like clockwork. Hot yoga at some boutique place in Los Altos that charged $200 a month for the privilege of sweating in a room full of other wealthy suburban women. I was in my home office, 2nd floor, overlooking the backyard where the pool guy was skimming leaves. My monitors glowed with lines of code. I was debugging a new intrusion detection algorithm for a client in the financial sector. Tedious work, the kind that requires absolute focus. But I've always had this habit, this paranoia, really, every few hours. I check the network logs for our home system. It's automatic, muscle memory, like checking your mirrors while driving. Our house is what they call a smart home. Everything connected. The thermostat, the lights, the security cameras, the door locks, the audio system. All running through a central hub that I built myself because I don't trust commercial systems. Too many vulnerabilities. Too many backdoors that manufacturers leave open for convenience. I pulled up the Wi-Fi access logs. Just routine. Scanning for any devices I didn't recognize. You'd be surprised how many people try to piggyback on residential networks in expensive neighborhoods. Or how many smart appliances have security holes you could drive a truck through. That's when I saw it. A device labeled Marcus_iPhone_14 Pro connected to the master bedroom access point at 11:47 a.m. Current time, 1:23 p.m. Still connected. I stared at that line in the log file. Read it 3 times. 4 times. Marcus was supposed to be at his office in San Francisco. Tuesday was his busiest day. Client meetings from morning until evening. He complained about it constantly. And Linda was supposed to be at yoga. My first thought was that the log was wrong. Maybe his phone had connected automatically when he was here last week for dinner. Cache credentials. It happens. But no, the timestamp was from today, this morning, and he was still connected. Active connection. My hands felt cold. That's the thing nobody tells you about moments like this. Your body knows before your brain catches up. Your hands go cold and your stomach drops, and there's this ringing in your ears like someone's pressing a tuning fork against your skull. I pulled up the Sonos system logs. We have speakers throughout the house. Whole home audio. Another thing I insisted on installing myself, because the commercial systems are garbage. There it was. A track had been playing in the master bedroom from 11:52 a.m. to 12:34 p.m. 42 minutes. Some jazz playlist I'd never heard of. The kind of smooth, sophisticated garbage Marcus always said was better than my classic rock. He'd forgotten to disconnect. That's what got him. Not some elaborate digital forensics investigation. Not some hacking wizardry. He'd shown Linda a song, connected his phone to the bedroom speakers, and forgotten to turn it off when he left. Amateur hour. I sat there in my chair, staring at my screens. The pool guy was still working outside. The neighbor's dog was barking. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly the same as it had been 5 minutes ago. Except it wasn't. I could have stopped there. Could have closed the logs and pretended I hadn't seen anything. Could have told myself there was some innocent explanation. Maybe Marcus had stopped by to drop something off. Maybe Linda had asked him to check something in the bedroom. Maybe pigs were flying and the moon was made of cheese. But I'm not wired that way. I don't ignore anomalies. I investigate them. It's what I do. I pulled up the security camera footage. We have cameras at every entrance. Front door, back door, garage, and one in the hallway upstairs, pointed at the staircase. For security, I'd told Linda when I installed them, so we'd know if someone broke and while we were out. She complained about the one upstairs, said it made her feel watched. I'd promised it wasn't pointed at the bedroom, and it wasn't. It was pointed at the stairs and the hallway. A compromise. I scrubbed through the footage. Found 11:43 a.m. There was Linda letting Marcus into the front door. She was wearing her yoga outfit, black leggings and a sports bra top, hair in a ponytail. She kissed his cheek. Normal greeting. Friendly. They went upstairs together. Disappeared from frame. I fast-forwarded. 12:38 p.m. They came back into view. Marcus was adjusting his shirt, tucking it in. Linda was touching her hair, smoothing it down. They stopped at the top of the stairs. She leaned in and kissed him, not a peck on the cheek. A real kiss, the kind you give someone when you don't want them to leave. Then she said something. I turned on the audio. The cameras don't record sound normally. I disabled that feature for privacy, but I could enable it for live monitoring. Of course, it wasn't live anymore. This was 40 minutes ago. I couldn't hear what she'd said, but I could read lips. Sort of. I've gotten decent at catching key words from watching surveillance footage for clients. You develop skills you never knew you needed. She was gesturing, frustrated body language. Her hand moved toward the stairs, clearly referring to me. Then she said something longer that I couldn't quite catch. But the last part was clear. 3 words I could make out perfectly. A loser's wife. That's what she'd called herself. Or what she called me. The context was obvious enough. Marcus had smiled, touched her face, said something back. Then he'd headed downstairs and left through the front door at 12:41 p.m. She'd watched him go, then disappeared back toward the bedroom, probably to shower before her actual yoga class at 2. I sat there for a long time. I don't know how long. Time does this weird thing when your brain is trying to process information it doesn't want to accept. It stretches and compresses, and you lose track of whether seconds or hours are passing. The rational part of my mind was already working, cataloging facts, building timelines. Marcus had access to all my financial information. He managed my investment portfolio. He knew exactly how much I was worth. Linda knew it too. She'd asked for a post-nup 3 years ago, which I'd signed because I'm an idiot who thought it didn't matter if you trusted your spouse. They wanted my money. They thought I was weak. A loser. The Rain Man who could build software, but couldn't see what was happening in his own life. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was exactly that stupid. But here's the thing about people like me. The ones who live in our heads, who think in systems and logic and patterns. We don't react the way you'd expect. We don't grab baseball bats and kick down doors and scream. That's not how we're wired. We analyze. We calculate. We build models of situation and run simulations until we find the optimal solution. And I was already building those models, already running those simulations. Marcus thought I was helpless. He'd said it 100 times. David can't function without someone managing his life. David needs me. Linda thought I was a loser, a meal ticket, a walking ATM machine with no social skills and no backbone. Fine. If that's what they thought, that's what I'd give them. I'd be exactly the person they believed I was. Confused, helpless, desperate for guidance. Right up until the moment when I wasn't. The sound of a car in the driveway snapped me back to the present. Linda's BMW. Right on schedule. She'd be coming into the garage, probably humming to herself, still glowing from her afternoon activities. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, let my face fall into the expression I perfected over 12 years of marriage. The slightly confused, perpetually overwhelmed look of a man who was brilliant with code, but hopeless with everything else. The look of someone who'd never suspect a thing. The garage door opened below me. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Light, happy. She was probably thinking about what lies she'd tell me about her day, about how relaxing yoga was, about how she felt so centered and calm. I stood up from my desk, stretched, put on that familiar, dopey smile. Time to play my part. Because if they wanted the Rain Man, they were going to get him. And they were going to learn, far too late, that there's a difference between being socially awkward and being stupid. A very expensive difference. The week that followed was performance art, method acting at its finest. I played the role of oblivious husband so convincingly that I almost believed it myself. Linda came home from yoga that Tuesday glowing and relaxed. I asked her how class was. She said it was wonderful, challenging but rewarding. The instructor had introduced some new poses. I nodded along like I always did, making appropriate sound of interest while my mind ran calculations in the background. Marcus called on Wednesday to discuss quarterly portfolio adjustments. His voice was smooth as always, confident. He threw around terms like capital gains optimization and tax loss harvesting. I let him talk, asked the occasional simple question that made me sound engaged but not too knowledgeable. The David they expected. The Rain Man who understood code, but not money. I spent those days building my trap, not with hammers and nails, but with research and planning, the kind of meticulous preparation that separates amateurs from professionals. OmniCorp was real, a massive technology conglomerate based in Seattle. They specialized in enterprise software and had a reputation for aggressive patent enforcement. They'd sued dozens of smaller companies over the years. Sometimes they won. Sometimes they settled. But they always made it expensive. More importantly, they had legal representation from Kellerman and Associates, the most feared law firm in New York. The kind of sharks who billed 4 figures an hour and made opposing counsel cry in depositions. Perfect. I didn't forge anything. That would be illegal. Stupid. What I did was carefully study the format of real cease and desist letters, the language, the structure, the threatening but legally precise tone that walks right up to the edge of intimidation without crossing into actionable territory. Then I had a conversation with my own attorney, a real one. I told him I was concerned about potential patent issues with one of my algorithms, asked him what a serious threat would look like. He was happy to explain. Lawyers love explaining worst-case scenarios. It's like watching horror movies for them. By Friday evening, I had everything I needed. The stage was set. The props were in place. All I needed was my audience. Marcus texted me around 6. Asked if I was home. Said he was in the neighborhood and thought he'd swing by for a drink if I wasn't busy. How convenient. Friday night. Linda would be home. They could tag team whatever they'd been planning. I told him to come by. Cracked open a bottle of Macallan 18-year that I'd been saving. Tonight seemed like an appropriate occasion. He showed up at 7, drove his Porsche Cayenne right into my driveway like he owned the place, bounded up the front steps with that easy confidence that came from never having faced real consequences for anything. We'd been friends for 25 years. I'd been in his wedding. He'd been at mine. We'd gotten drunk together in college, celebrated promotions and successes, and all the milestones that make up a life. And now, he was sleeping with my wife and planning to rob me blind. The human experience is fascinating when you step back and observe it clinically. The capacity for betrayal, the justifications people create for their own behavior. I wondered what story he told himself. Probably something about Linda deserving better, about me being too focused on work to appreciate her, about how this was somehow noble. Linda greeted him at the door. Warm hug, lingering just a second too long. I watched from the kitchen where I was pulling out glasses. They didn't know I could see them reflected in the microwave door. Small tells. Her hand on his arm. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. I poured 3 fingers of scotch into 2 glasses. Called out that drinks were ready. They came into the kitchen. Marcus loosened his tie. Made some comment about how he'd been stuck in back-to-back client meetings all day and needed this. Linda excused herself to change out of her dress into something more comfortable. The house felt too warm. Or maybe that was just me. I took a sip of scotch. Let it burn. Marcus settled onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. Asked how work was going. I told him it was fine. Busy. Same old grind. He nodded sympathetically and launched into a story about one of his clients who was panicking over market volatility. I let him talk. Watched his hands gesture as he explained some complicated financial maneuver that I only half followed. He was in his element. Performing. This was what Marcus did. He made people feel like he was the smartest person in the room, even when he wasn't. Linda came back wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater. Poured herself a glass of white wine from the fridge. The 3 of us stood there in my kitchen like everything was normal, like this was just another Friday evening. Then I reached into the drawer where I'd hidden the envelope. Heavy cream-colored paper. Embossed return address. Red wax seal stamped with urgent in block letters. The kind of official-looking correspondence that makes your stomach drop even before you open it. I set it on the counter between us. Didn't say anything. Just let it sit there. Marcus noticed it immediately. His eyes went to the return address. I watched his expression shift, the easy confidence flickering. Linda looked between us, asked what it was. I told him it had arrived by courier that afternoon. Special delivery. Signature required. Marcus picked it up, turned it over. The seal was unbroken. He looked at me, asked if I'd opened it yet. I shook my head, said I'd been afraid to. That wasn't entirely a lie. I had been afraid, but not for the reasons they thought. I'd been afraid I'd overplayed my hand, that the letter wouldn't be convincing enough, that Marcus would see through it immediately. But watching his face as he broke the seal, I knew I'd nailed it. The letter was perfect. 6 pages of dense legal prose on Kellerman and Associates letterhead. Real letterhead. Actually, their format is publicly available on their website. Anyone can see what their correspondence looks like. The substance was simple. Omnicorp was alleging that Sentinel Code's flagship algorithm violated 4 of their patents. They were demanding immediate cessation of all related business activities and $100 million in damages. We had 48 hours to respond, or they would file in federal court. It was beautifully, terrifyingly plausible. Because here's the thing about patent law. It's a minefield. Software patents especially. You can write the most original code in the world and still technically infringe on some broad patent that someone filed 15 years ago, claiming they invented the concept of using computers to do computer things. Most patent threats are bullshit, but they're expensive bullshit. Even if you're completely in the right, defending yourself costs millions. And if you lose everything. Marcus was reading. I could see his eyes tracking across the pages, his jaw tightening. He flipped to the 2nd page, the 3rd. His face was going pale under his permanent golf course tan. Linda asked what it said. Her voice had an edge of worry. She probably assumed it was some minor business problem, a vendor dispute, a contract negotiation. Marcus set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. He looked at me with something close to pity. He told me this was bad, really bad. He recognized a law firm. They were the most vicious litigators in the country. They didn't send cease and desist letters as negotiating tactics. They sent them as warnings before they annihilated you. I asked him what he thought I should do. Kept my voice small, uncertain, the way I always sounded when talking about things outside my technical expertise. He picked the letter back up. Read through it again more carefully. His hands were actually shaking slightly. I noticed Linda noticed too. He started explaining the situation to her, used his investment banker voice, the one that made complicated things sound simple and terrifying things sound inevitable. Omnicorp was a giant. They had unlimited legal resources. Even if the patents were questionable, fighting them would cost between $5 and $10 million. Sentinel Code didn't have that kind of liquid capital. Most of our assets were tied up in equipment and intellectual property. We could maybe scrape together $2 million if we liquidated everything. It wouldn't be enough. Linda was gripping her wine glass, so tight I thought it might shatter. She asked what would happen if we lost. Marcus explained. They'd pierce the corporate veil, come after personal assets, the house, the cars, the investment accounts, everything. I'd be bankrupt. She'd be bankrupted along with me. I let my head drop into my hands. Told them my attorney had looked at the patents that afternoon. Said we had maybe a 10% chance of winning outright. More likely we'd end up settling for 20 or 30 million just to make it go away. Linda made a sound. Not quite a gasp. More like air leaving a balloon. I told her I was sorry. That I should have been more careful. That I'd failed her. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I believed it myself in that moment. The broken man watching his empire crumble. Marcus was still staring at the letter. He'd moved past shock into calculation mode. I could practically see the gears turning. He was running scenarios, analyzing exposures, figuring out how this affected his own situation. Because here's what I'd counted on. Marcus wasn't just my friend. He was my financial advisor. And if I went bankrupt, it would look terrible for him. His other clients would start asking questions. Why didn't you see this coming? Why didn't you protect him? His reputation would take a hit, maybe a serious one. But more importantly, and this is what I'd really gambled on, he'd start thinking about Linda, about their plans, about how this disaster would complicate everything. I excused myself, said I needed to take a walk, clear my head, figure out what to do next. Linda started to follow me. I told her I needed a minute alone. My voice cracked slightly. She nodded and stayed put. I walked out through the living room toward the back patio. But I didn't go outside. I stopped just around the corner, out of sight, where I could hear everything. The kitchen was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Then Marcus started talking, low and urgent. He told Linda they needed to think strategically. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting her. About protecting what she'd built during this marriage. She asked what he meant. He laid it out. Omnicorp would file for asset seizure. They'd freeze bank accounts, put liens on property. The house would be the first thing they'd target. It was worth $2 million at least. She needed to get out of my name before they could touch it. Linda asked how. Marcus said the word I'd been waiting for. Divorce. She needed to file immediately, Monday morning. Get ahead of the creditors. California was a community property state. She was entitled to half of everything. But more importantly, she could argue that the house was her primary residence, that she needed it protected for her security. A good attorney could get her the house and enough liquid assets to sustain her lifestyle. Leave me with the company, the patents, the lawsuit, the debt, all of it. Linda's voice was shaking when she asked if that would work. Marcus told her it was the only play. She had maybe 72 hours before Omnicorp started filing motions. She needed to act now, file for divorce, claim the house, and whatever cash they could justify as her share. Get out before the ship went down. She asked about me. What would happen to me? Marcus was quiet for a second. Then he said I'd probably declare bankruptcy. Start over. It would take years, but I'd rebuild eventually. I was smart enough, but she couldn't go down with me. She deserved better than that. She deserved better than being married to a loser. I stood there in the shadows, listening to them plan my financial execution. Part of me wanted to laugh. The other part wanted to vomit. But mostly I just felt this cold satisfaction, because they were doing exactly what I needed them to do. Taking the bait, running with it, making decisions based on fear and greed, and the assumption that I was too broken to think clearly. I waited another minute. Heard Linda start to cry softly. Heard Marcus comfort her. Tell her it would be okay. That he'd help her through it. Then I walked back into the kitchen. Made sure my eyes looked red. My shoulders slumped. They jumped apart slightly. Tried to look casual. Failed miserably. I told them I'd call my attorney. Left a voicemail. He'd get back to me Monday. In the meantime, I didn't know what to do. Maybe just try to get through the weekend. Linda was staring at me with this strange expression. Part guilt, part calculation, part something else I couldn't quite identify. She stood up, smoothed her sweater, told me she needed to talk to me about something important. Her voice was steady, resolved. The tears were gone. She'd made her decision. She said we needed to discuss our relationship, our future, that she couldn't live like this anymore, with this kind of stress and uncertainty hanging over everything. I nodded, looked down at my feet, told her I understood. Marcus was watching both of us, his face carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hand gripped his scotch glass. He was scared, but he was also confident. Confident that he'd figured out the right move. Confident that he was saving Linda from my disaster. Confident that he was smarter than me. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered the surveillance footage. The way Linda had kissed him. The way she called herself a loser's wife. And I didn't feel bad at all. I felt patient. Linda filed for divorce on Monday morning. I know because I got the email notification from the county court system at 9:17 a.m. I was sitting in my home office, soon to be my former home office, drinking coffee that tasted like ashes. The petition was exactly what Marcus had coached her file. Irreconcilable differences. Request for primary residence. Division of assets heavily weighted in her favor. She was asking for the house, the liquid accounts, both cars, and complete separation from any business liabilities. She wanted out. Clean. Fast. Before the wolves came for the carcass. Her attorney was Richard Pemberton. I knew the name. Everyone in Silicon Valley knew the name. He specialized in high-net-worth divorces, the kind where there was enough money that people fought over the art and the wine collection. He was expensive, aggressive, exactly the kind of representation you'd want if you were trying to salvage what you could from a sinking ship. We met in his office the following Thursday, downtown San Jose, 20th floor of a glass tower that reflected the sun like a mirror. The kind of building where the elevator plays smooth jazz and every surface is polished to a shine. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. You could see all the way to the bay on clear days. Today was overcast. Gray clouds pressing down like a headache. Pemberton was in his 50s. Silver hair, $1,000 suit. Handshake like a vice grip designed to establish dominance. He introduced himself and his associate, a younger woman with a tablet and a predatory smile. Linda was already seated. She wouldn't look at me directly, kept her eyes on the papers in front of her or on Pemberton when he spoke. She was wearing a navy dress. Professional. The kind you wear when you want to look serious and sympathetic at the same time. Marcus wasn't there. Of course not. That would be too obvious. But I knew he'd prepped her, walked her through every clause, made sure she understood exactly what she was taking and what she was leaving behind. My attorney was a guy named Bob Chun, mid-40s, rumpled suit, caffeine tremors. He looked like he'd slept in his car, and I'd specifically chosen him because he looked harmless, overworked, the kind of lawyer who handled straightforward divorces for middle-class couples splitting up a mortgage and a Honda Civic. Pemberton probably took one look at him and mentally added another zero to his bill. We sat down. Pemberton slid a document across the table. Marital settlement agreement. 43 pages. I knew because I counted while he gave his opening speech about how his client simply wanted a fair and expedient resolution. Fair. That was the word he used. Fair. Bob took the document and started reading. His lips moved slightly. I'd told him to act concerned, to ask questions that made it seem like he was fighting for me, but ultimately concede every point. He was earning his fee by looking outmatched. The terms were harsh. Linda got the house. Full ownership, valued at $2.1 million in the current market. She got the liquid savings accounts. $523,000. She got her BMW and my Tesla. She got the timeshare in Maui that we'd used twice in 5 years. I got Sentinel Code. 100% ownership of the company and all its assets, all its intellectual property, all its contracts and obligations, and all its liabilities. The document spelled it out in legal language that took 3 paragraphs to say what could have been said in 1 sentence. David assumes full responsibility for any and all debts, lawsuits, claims, or financial obligations related to Sentinel Code, including but not limited to the pending legal action initiated by Omnicorp. Linda was washing her hands of the whole mess, getting out while she still could. Bob made a show of objecting, said the division was inequitable, that I was being left with nothing but debt and problems. That California was a community property state, and this violated the spirit of that law. Pemberton smiled, patient, understanding. He explained that his client was being more than generous. She was accepting a massive financial risk by taking the house and liquid assets. If Omnicorp prevailed in their lawsuit, if they pierced the corporate veil, they could still come after community property acquired during the marriage. Linda was gambling that the divorce would provide some protection, but she was being reasonable. She wasn't asking for spousal support, wasn't asking for a share of future earnings. She just wanted to separate cleanly and move on with her life. The subtext was clear. She was doing me a favor by not demanding more, by not dragging this out, by letting me keep my toxic company and all the disasters that came with it. Bob looked at me, asked if I wanted to counterpropose, if I wanted to fight this. I shook my head, told him I just wanted it over. There was one clause that Pemberton seemed particularly proud of, Section 7.3, Waiver of Future Claims. It stated that Linda relinquished any and all rights to future assets, earnings, or value derived from Sentinel Code. In exchange, she was released from any liability associated with the company's debts or legal obligations. She couldn't come back later if the company somehow recovered, couldn't claim she deserved a peace if some miracle happened and Sentinel Code became valuable again. She was out, completely. Pemberton asked if I understood that clause, if I acknowledged what it meant. I said I understood. I was giving up everything else but keeping the company. If by some chance I rebuilt, she had no claim. That was the deal. He seemed satisfied. Probably thought I was delusional, that there was no rebuilding from $100 million lawsuit, that I was clinging to false hope because I couldn't accept reality. Bob actually asked him to clarify, made Pemberton explain it twice, really hammer home the point that Linda was walking away from any future stake in the company. Marcus had definitely reviewed this clause multiple times. This was the key. This was what made Linda safe. She'd get the tangible assets now. I'd keep the liability and the worthless company. Clean separation. We went through the rest of the document, asset by asset, account by account. It took 90 minutes. Pemberton's associate took notes on her tablet. Linda signed where she was supposed to sign. Her signature was steady. Practice. She'd probably rehearsed it. Then came my turn. 43 pages. Initial here. Sign here. Date here. The pen felt heavy. Mont Blanc. I bought it to sign the closing documents on the house. The house that was now Linda's. There's something poetic about that. Using the same pen to sign the beginning and the end. I initialed every page. Signed every signature line. My handwriting was clear. No hesitation. No trembling. Just David Brennan over and over in black ink. Bob witnessed. Then Pemberton. Then his associate. Legal. Binding. Final. When it was done, Linda finally looked at me. Really looked at me. There was relief in her eyes. The kind you see in people who just missed a car accident by inches. She'd escaped. Made it out before the crash. She thanked me for being reasonable. For not making this difficult. I told her I hoped she'd be happy. Meant it too. In a strange way. I hoped she got exactly what she deserved. Pemberton started gathering documents. Putting copies in folders. Making efficient lawyers sound about filing timelines and final judgments. The meeting was basically over. We just dissolved a 12-year marriage in less than 2 hours. That's when Marcus's presence made itself known. Not physically, but in a comment. A small moment of victory that he couldn't resist even in absentia. Pemberton noticed my watch. Patek Philippe Nautilus. Rose gold. I bought it 5 years ago. $42,000. An indulgence. A symbol of having made it. He commented on it. Nice piece. Classic design. And then he casually mentioned that Marcus had one similar. Had shown it to him at some charity event. They'd talked watches for 20 minutes. Funny coincidence that we both had good taste. The implication was subtle but clear. Marcus and Pemberton knew each other. Had probably discussed this case. Marcus had been involved in the strategy. Had helped Linda find the right attorney. The right approach. Linda's expression flickered. Just for a second. She knew she'd been revealed. I smiled. Tired. Defeated. Told Pemberton that Marcus had always had better taste than me. In everything. Then I did something I had been planning since the moment I conceived this whole play. I reached down and unclasped my watch. The weight of it in my palm was substantial. Luxury as mass. Presence. I set it on the polished conference table between us. Bob looked confused. Linda looked startled. I told Pemberton he should give it to Marcus next time he saw him, as payment for all the financial advice over the years, for being such a good friend, for helping Linda through this difficult time. I said I wouldn't need it where I was going. That time didn't matter much when you were starting from zero. Pemberton didn't take it. That would be inappropriate. But Linda's hand moved slightly. An aborted reach. She wanted it, not from Marcus necessarily, just as proof, as evidence that I really was broken. The watch sat there on the table. $42,000 in rose gold and complications. A symbol of success that now represented failure. We stood, shook hands. The ritual of civilized endings. Pemberton said his office would file the paperwork within 48 hours. The divorce would be final in 6 months barring any complications. California law. Linda left first. Didn't say goodbye. Just gathered her purse and walked out with her shoulders straight and her head high. She'd survived. That's what her posture said. She'd been smart enough to get out in time. Bob and I took the elevator down together. He asked if I was okay. Professional concern mixed with genuine awkwardness. I told him I was fine. Thanked him for his help. Paid his bill with a check that would clear exactly once before my accounts were transferred to Linda. I walked out into the parking garage. My Tesla was gone. Linda's now. Bob had driven me. I told him I'd catch an Uber. Needed some air. He looked uncomfortable. Asked again if I was sure I was okay. If I had somewhere to go. I told him I had a friend's place I could crash at. A lie. But it made him feel better. Let him leave without feeling guilty about abandoning a client who'd just lost everything. I watched his Camry disappear down the spiral ramp. Then I was alone in the concrete cathedral of the parking structure. The sound of distant traffic. The smell of motor oil and exhaust. The harsh fluorescent lighting that makes everything look sick. I pulled out my phone. Not my regular phone. A burner I bought specifically for this moment. Prepaid. Anonymous. I dialed a number I'd memorized. It rang twice. Jake answered. My lead engineer. The guy who'd been with Sentinel Code since the beginning. Who knew every line of code in our core algorithm. Who understood what we'd built better than anyone except me. I told him they'd signed. Everything was finalized. The company was mine. 100%. No strings. No shared ownership. No complications. I told him to prepare the response to OmniCorp. The real response. Not the panic capitulation they were expecting, not the desperate settlement offer. I told him we were going to accept their challenge, but on our terms, in our timeline, with our conditions. My voice had changed. The defeated monotone was gone. The uncertain hesitation had evaporated. I sounded like myself again. Clear, focused, in control. Jake was quiet for a second. Then he laughed. Short and sharp. He'd known, not the details, but he'd known I was playing an angle, that there was more going on than what appeared on the surface. He asked what the next move was. I told him I'd be in the office tomorrow. We had work to do. We had a negotiation to win. He said he'd have everything ready. The whole team was standing by. They'd been waiting for this call. I hung up, stood there in the parking garage with a burner phone in my hand, and no watch on my wrist, and no car to drive home in. I'd never felt more free in my entire life. The next 30 days were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Or at least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Inside? Inside, it was a precision operation. Every move calculated. Every response measured. Every piece sliding into place exactly as I designed it. OmniCorp's letter had been real. That part wasn't theater. They really had sent a cease and desist. They really were claiming patent infringement. They really were threatening $100 million in damages. But here's what Marcus hadn't understood. What Linda hadn't understood. What nobody understood except me and my legal team. The letter wasn't a precursor to a lawsuit. It was a negotiating tactic. A sledgehammer designed to break down the door so they could walk in and take what they wanted at a discount. OmniCorp didn't want to destroy Sentinel Code. They wanted to buy it, but they wanted to buy it cheap. Terrified, desperate. They'd done this before. It was their playbook. Send scary letters. Threaten ruinous litigation. Watch the target panic and accept whatever offer came next just to make the nightmare stop. It worked 90% of the time. Small companies folded. Founders capitulated. Intellectual property changed hands for pennies on the dollar because fighting seemed impossible. But I wasn't panicking anymore. I wasn't married anymore. I wasn't splitting assets with a wife who wanted stability and safety and predictable outcomes. I was a single man with a company that was either worthless or incredibly valuable, depending on how you looked at it. And I had nothing to lose. That's a dangerous negotiating position. When you're willing to burn it all down, suddenly you have all the leverage. My actual attorney, not Bob Chen, who'd serve his purpose perfectly, was a woman named Sarah Mitchell, IP litigation specialist. 15 years of experience fighting patent trolls and corporate bullies. She was expensive, but I'd kept enough in a separate account that Linda hadn't known about to afford her. Yes, I'd hidden money. Not much. $50,000. Enough to fund a legal defense if needed. Technically questionable ethically. Practically necessary. Sarah reviewed OmniCorp's patents. Spent a week doing deep analysis. Came back with a 17-page memo explaining why their claims were garbage. They'd filed broad software patents in the early 2000s, the kind that claimed ownership of basic concepts. Our algorithm didn't infringe. Not technically. Not if you actually understood the code. But proving that would take 2 years and $5 million, which is exactly what OmniCorp was counting on. So we didn't fight them in court. We didn't respond to their cease and desist with legal arguments and technical rebuttals. We called their bluff. Sarah drafted a letter. Professional, polite, firm. It acknowledged receipt of their concerns, noted that we disputed their claims, and informed them that Sentinel Code was prepared to litigate this matter for as long as necessary to defend our intellectual property rights. We didn't offer to settle, didn't propose a licensing deal, didn't show any indication of fear or weakness. We said, bring it on. Then we did something clever. We filed a declaratory judgment action in federal court. Preemptive strike. We asked the court to declare that we weren't infringing their patents. Force them to either put up or shut up. It was a risky move, but it changed the dynamic completely. Suddenly they were on defense. They'd have to actually prove their claims, spend their money, invest their time, risk losing, and having their patents invalidated. And here's the thing about big corporations. They hate uncertainty. They hate protracted legal battles that tie up resources and distract from core business. They especially hate fighting someone who has nothing to lose and everything to gain. 2 weeks after we filed our action, I got a call from OmniCorp's general counsel, not their lawyers, their in-house top legal executive. He wanted to meet, discuss options, find a reasonable resolution that benefited both parties. Translation, they wanted to buy me out, make this go away, turn a potential disaster into a strategic acquisition. We met in Palo Alto, neutral territory, a conference room at a law office neither of us were affiliated with. He brought their chief technology officer, a woman named Dr. Rebecca Chow, Stanford PhD, 20 years in cybersecurity. She knew our algorithm, knew what it could do, knew what it was worth. They made their pitch. OmniCorp wanted to acquire Sentinel Code's core technology, full asset purchase. They drop all patent claims, provide legal indemnification, offer me a position as CTO of their security division. I asked what they were offering. The general counsel smiled, said they'd done extensive valuation analysis, considered market comparables, revenue projections, strategic value. He slid a term sheet across the table. $215 million. I kept my face neutral, didn't react, just picked up the term sheet and read through it carefully. All cash, closing within 60 days. I'd retain 10% equity in the subsidiary they'd create. 5-year employment contract with a compensation package worth another $20 million if I hit certain milestones. It was more than generous. It was life-changing. It was everything I'd built over 15 years distilled into a number that would let me never work again if I chose. I told them I needed to review with my attorney. They expected that, gave me 48 hours to respond. We shook hands. Professional, cordial. They thought they'd won. Got the technology they wanted without the mess of litigation, at a price that was probably below market, but high enough that I couldn't possibly refuse. What they didn't know was that I'd been expecting this exact offer, had gamed out the negotiation, known that the cease and desist was theater designed to set up this moment. I called Sarah from my car, told her to review the term sheet, but that we were going to accept it. She asked if I was sure, if I wanted to counter, try for more. I told her $215 million was perfect, exactly what I'd hoped for. She laughed, said I was either the luckiest man alive or the smartest. Probably both. I didn't correct her, just said to prepare the acceptance documents. The deal closed 6 weeks later. Wire transfer hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I watched the numbers appear on my screen. 9 digits. My company, my algorithm, my 15 years of work converted into liquid capital. I'd started Sentinel Code in a garage apartment with a laptop and an idea, built it line by line, grown it carefully, and now it belonged to someone else. But the money belonged to me, all of it, because I was the sole owner, because Linda had signed away any claim to future assets, because Marcus had been so clever in protecting her from my liabilities that he'd accidentally locked her out of my windfall. The news broke that afternoon. Bloomberg ran it first. OmniCorp acquires Sentinel Code for $215 million. Found her to lead new security division. It spread fast. Tech sites picked it up. Industry newsletters. LinkedIn was full of congratulations and analysis. Everyone suddenly wanted to be my friend, to take me to lunch, to talk about opportunities. I ignored most of it, but I watched the reactions I cared about. Jake sent me a text. 3 words. You magnificent bastard. Sarah sent an email. Invoice attached. Her fee was substantial, but she'd earned every penny. I paid it immediately and added a bonus. And then, around 6 p.m., my phone started buzzing. Not the burner. My regular phone. The one Linda and Marcus still had the number 4. I was sitting in a coffee shop in Mountain View. Small place. Good espresso. Windows facing the street where I could watch people walking past living their normal lives. The phone vibrated against the table. Linda calling. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. Voicemail again. Then a text. Then another call. Then Marcus. Same pattern. Call. Voicemail. Text. Call. The texts were frantic. We need to talk. There's been a mistake. Call me back right now. This is urgent. I could imagine the scene. Linda seeing the Bloomberg alert. The number, 215 million. Understanding slowly what had happened, what she'd signed away. Calling Marcus in a panic. Him realizing his clever protective strategy had backfired catastrophically. They'd saved her from my debts, protected her from my liabilities, gotten her the house and the cash in the cars, all while leaving me with a worthless company that was about to destroy me. Except the company wasn't worthless. It was worth more than everything she'd taken combined, and she'd given up any claim to it in writing, signed and witnessed and filed with the court. The irony was so perfect, it was almost painful. I set the phone on the table, turned off the ringer, watched it light up with call after call, message after message, the desperate attempts to reach me, to explain, to negotiate, to beg. I didn't answer, didn't respond, didn't engage. Instead, I did something I'd been thinking about since that day in the parking garage. I opened the contact list, found Linda's name, press block, confirmed, then Marcus, block, confirm, gone. Deleted from my phone and my life. No more calls. No more texts. No more explanations or excuses or attempts to reconcile. They'd made their choices, calculated their risks, decided I was a loser worth abandoning, worth betraying, worth leaving with nothing but problems. And now they got to live with those choices. Watch from the outside while I move forward without them. Wonder how much money they'd cost themselves. Wonder if I had planned it all from the beginning. I had, of course, not every detail, but the broad strokes. Use their greed against them. Let them think they were clever. Give them exactly what they wanted and make sure it destroyed them. The best revenge is living well. That's what people say. But I'd add a corollary. The best revenge is letting people destroy themselves while thinking they're winning. I looked at my wrist where my watch used to be. The tan line was fading. In a few more weeks, there'd be no evidence it had ever been there. I didn't miss it. Didn't miss the weight, the status symbol, the $42,000 reminder that I'd made it, because I didn't need reminders anymore. Didn't need symbols. The numbers in my account were real. The freedom was real. The future was real. Time had always been on my side. I just had to be patient enough to let it work. I ordered another coffee. Double espresso. The barista was young. College student probably. She made small talk about the weather. Asked if I wanted anything else. A pastry maybe. I told her just the coffee. She smiled and went to make it. Steam hissed. The espresso machine gurgled. Normal sound of a normal afternoon in a normal coffee shop. I took my first sip. Let the bitterness spread across my tongue. It was good. Really good. The kind of good that comes from actually tasting what you're drinking instead of just consuming it automatically. For the first time in 10 years, coffee tasted exactly the way it was supposed to. Everything did.